Watching this video, please do watch the videos on the topic of arrays. In this video, we're going to discuss about a question which is the sum of subarray. This is taken from the Geeks for Geeks website and the link of the question is given in the description box below. So let's get started.
Let's take an example of an array. Let's say 4, 5, 6. And here, in this approach, what we're going to do is, first we are going to get the sum of subarrays. And after we get the sum of subarrays, we are going to add them. See, using a nested for loop, what we are going to do is, initially we are going to get the sum of the subarrays. Sum of the subarrays in the sense, see, we are going to get numbers like 4, and the other one is going to be 4 plus 5, the other one is going to be 4 plus 5 plus 6, and the other one is 5 plus 6, and the final one is 6. So these are all the sum of the subarrays. So using the for loop, we are going to get all these sum of subarrays, and what we are going to do is, in one variable, let's say result, we are going to store the sum of all these sums. So what we'll do is 4 plus 4 plus and we are going to just add all of these numbers, and we are going to get the sum of the subarray over here. So this is the overview of the approach. Let's look at this on our code editor. So here the input is taken beforehand. Now what I did is I've created a method over here, static int subarray, and we have taken the values of array and the size of the array. So now what we're going to do is, initially we're going to create a variable called as temp and equate that to 0. Now we'll create a for loop. We need to also create a variable called as result and equate it to 0. Now we'll create a for loop for int I equals 0, I less than n, I plus plus, and for int j equals I, j less than n, j plus plus. Here the temp is equal to 0. Why this particular temp is, we have equated this to 0, and whatever the values of the sum of the subarrays we are going to get, I showed you, right, all the values of the sum of subarrays, that thing we are going to store in this, and those sum of subarrays we will add them and we'll store them in the result variable. So here what we are going to do is temp plus equals arr of j. After this, what we're going to do is result plus equals arr of result plus equals temp. Finally, we are going to return the temp. Sorry, we are going to return the result. Now let's run this particular program. Here we need to provide the input. So it is going to be 3 and 4, 5, 6. So here the answer it provided is 48. Sorry, it is supposed to be j equals I. That is why I think we got a mistake. So again we'll run this. See, now it gave the correct answer. So here the mistake I did was, here it should be j equals I. Yeah, here it should be j equals I, but I wrote j equals 1. That's why we got a wrong answer. So what we are doing here is, we are using a for loop, first for loop to iterate through the array, and the second for loop, like the second for loop is kind of a pointer which changes its values, and we are going to add those numbers and we are going to store it in this temp variable, and whatever the numbers are stored in the temp variable, those things we are going to again add them in the result, and we are going to give the result. Now this method is not very much important because of its time complexity. The time complexity of this method is big O of n square, so this method is not at all recommended, and if you even use this in some coding competitions, then it doesn't work because of its time complexity. There is another method which works in big O of n time. We will look at that approach. So now we're going to discuss about the second approach. Here I'm taking this particular array and these are the indices of that particular array. Now what the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write all the subarrays. So that would be 3, 3, 5, 3, 5, 7 and 5, 5, 7 and 7. So these are all the subarrays that are possible with this particular array. So the second thing which I'm going to do is, now I wrote all these subarrays. Now I'm going to divide them into two parts. You might be wondering, why am I dividing them into two parts? What is going on? See, the thing I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to find a type of formula in which if you substitute the values, you directly get the answer of the sum of subarrays. So that is what I'm trying to do with this approach. So here, I'm going to divide this particular subarrays into two types. The first type is which begins with ARR of I, and the second type is which don't begin with ARR of I. Now you might be confused. What do you mean by begin with ARR of I? See here, for example, we will take some I value. Let us say we take the I value as 1. Now how many are such elements which begin with I? So this particular thing begins with I and this particular thing begins with I. See, I value is 1. So the value at the first index is 5, right? So we will only talk with respect to 5 in this case. So here which begins with 5 are 1 and 2. These both subarrays begin with 5, and there are two subarrays which don't begin with 5. Now here it's not beginning with 5, but 5 is present in this subarray. So there are two such kind of subarrays. What I've done is I've divided them into two types. Now the question is, how many subarrays are there which begin with 5, and how many subarrays are there which don't begin with 5? Now here, if you could see, you can count everything. You can count this and say there are two subarrays which begin with 5 and there are two which don't begin with 5. But when you are not able to see the array, see, in general cases you are not able to see the array. So here you have to figure it out. How many begin with I and how many don't begin. So the number of elements, the number of subarrays that begin with I are n minus I. If you want, you can check it out. The value of n is 3. See, n is nothing but the size of the array. So here 3 minus the value of I is 1. So 3 minus 1, 2. There are only two subarrays which are present that begin with I. And how many subarrays don't begin with I? They are n minus I into I. So this also you can see 3 minus 1 into 1, which is 2. There are only two subarrays that are present which don't begin with I. Now you found how many such subarrays are there for which begin with I, and how many subarrays are there which don't begin with I. So you found for both of them. Now what you have to do is you are supposed to total them up. So that is 1 plus 2. See, these both equations you are supposed to add so that you can find how many such subarrays are there, so that you can just make a formula of this particular thing. So which is n minus I plus n minus I into I. So if you resolve this particular thing, the thing you are gonna get is n minus I into I plus 1. This is the final thing which you are going to get. Now I will erase the left part. So the final formula is the array element ARR of I into n minus I into I plus 1. This is the final formula using which you can find the sum of all the subarrays for any given array. Now first thing, here we'll try to apply this formula to this particular array. Okay, so ARR of 0 into 3 minus 0 into 0 plus 1 plus, I'll write the other one below, ARR of 1 into 3 minus 1 into 1 plus 1 plus ARR of 2 into 3 minus 2 into 2 plus 1. What I did here is I wrote this is n minus 1, I plus 1, yeah, correct. Okay, so what is the value here? So if you put the values in and if you solve this, the final answer that you're gonna get is 50. And if you check by adding up all these numbers, then you get the same value as 50. Now let's check this particular thing on our IDE. So just like before, what we're gonna do is create a class static. Let's take the type as int and subarray, inside which we are gonna have an array. Oh, I'm sorry. The class should be created here, right? Yes. Array and int n. Let me give some gap over here. Inside this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a variable called as result, inside which we're gonna add everything, and initially we're gonna put the value as 0. Now simply what we'll do is we'll write a for loop for int I equals 0, I less than n, I plus plus, and result plus equals ARR of I plus, ARR of I into n minus I into I plus 1. Now this is the result and we have to return this value. Now the code is complete. It is this simple. Now here what we are going to do is, the first thing we'll do is we'll instantiate the scanner class, the scanner SA equals, here I'm not gonna write the print message because it's gonna take a lot of time. So int n equals sc dot next int, and taking the input of array for int I equals 0, I less than n, I plus plus, ARR of I equals sc dot okay, we should initialize an array first. Now it's fine. So the final thing which we're gonna do is we're gonna call the method subarray ARR comma n. Now let's run this code first. The same values. See, the size of the array is 3 and the elements are 4, 5 and 6. This is what I forgot. Now let's again run it. 3 and same 4, 5, 6. It has printed the value of 50. So here we got the right answer.